Okay, herzlich willkommen hier im Presseclub Concordia. I'm going to switch to English because for the most part of this evening, this is going to be our language of choice. My name is Matthias Zoya. I'm responsible for communications here at Presseclub Concordia. Concordia is Vienna's oldest press club. Some say it's even the oldest journalist organization still existing in the world. At least I'm saying it. It has been founded in 1859, so actually on the 7th of November, we just celebrated birthday. It was our sweet 166. And ever since its inception in 1859, Concordia has been trying to improve the conditions for independent journalism. And one important part of these conditions is the access to public information. And this is not at all part of the Austrian DNA and culture, because our Freedom of Information Act only became law this September. In comparison, in Sweden, there is the so-called, please forgive my pronunciation, Offentlichkeitsprinzipien, which has already been around for almost 300 years. It's been around since 1766. Not 300 years, but a long time. And so we have a lot to learn from this head start in access to public information. And of course, we want to learn from the best. And I'm very happy that one of the best is here with us today. I welcome Ali Fegan, who is one of the most distinguished investigative journalists in Sweden. I also welcome representatives of the Swedish Embassy, Jonas Wester. We are going to hear about the other perspective from him. He's going to give us insights on information requests from the side of the government and the state. And I also welcome Nikolai Atefie. He's an Austrian journalist who has worked in Sweden and who is going to give us insights on both cultures of public information. And he's also the one responsible why we are here today. He had the idea of this event, so thank you for that. And also thank you to our partners, Dossier and Forum Informationsfreiheit, with whom we organize these events. So we will start with presentations by Nikolai and Jonas, and after that there's going to be a presentation of Ali Fegan, and after that we have some time for Q&A. And then we will meet at the bar for snacks provided by the Swedish Embassy. Thank you for that. And for some drinks provided by us. Thank us for that. And yeah, enjoy. Thanks. Nikolai.
Ja, tack så mycket. Hjärtligt välkommen också från min sida. Is there someone that doesn't speak Swedish? 2 or 3? Okay, we do it in English. I didn't know that we do it in English, so my presentation is actually in German, but it will all work out. My name is Nikolai. I'm a freelance investigative journalist based in Austria and Sweden, and I'm giving you a quick introduction of fast investigative jobs that you can do with the Swedish Freedom of Information Act, and hopefully you can also use that in Austria, like quick requests to the government, which can give you a lot of interesting information that can become into unique stories. Yes, I made the presentation 45 minutes ago, so let's see if I remember what's next. Yes, so 3 stories I'm gonna talk about. I was living in Sweden in a small city called Karlstad. And in Karlstad, we have this beautiful, huge, very important airport called Karlstad Airport. And they have, I think, 1 regular flight every day to Copenhagen. But they also have a lot of private flights. And I thought, follow the money. Who knows where the flights might go? And maybe I find some interesting stories there. So I made a request to the city of Karlstad, who owns the airport, so that's why I could get the information, because it's a publicly owned entity. And they gave me a list of flights for the last 3 years showing the name of the plane, the license plate, where the plane is registered, where it went to or from where it arrived, the amount of passengers, what kind of flight it was. So if it was an ambulance flight, a transportation flight, a military flight. So I had like 9,000 flights, which I went through one by one by one. After a month, my boss at the Swedish radio said, "How are you doing?" I was like, "I think I'm almost done with it." And yes, this data gave me 6 unique stories. This is with Google Translate. One story was that we found out that a local businessman was responsible for the most private jet flights in Karlstad airport, which is interesting because he presents himself as a very environmental friendly businessman. Another story that we found out is that most of the private jets, 40-something%, are flying empty. And we had 900 private jets flying to Karlstad. And why are they flying empty? Well, a private jet is like a taxi for rich people. It comes empty, you call it, picks you up, brings you somewhere, brings you back, and then flies empty back to the station. That caused a huge media echo. It was the most listened to story of the year from our local radio. And another story that we found out is there were many small airplanes that had a US license plate. And these planes, is a Cessna something, they can fly about 2,000 kilometers. So they cannot even fly from Sweden to the US. So you wonder, why are US registered planes standing at the airport in Karlstad, of all places? Turns out that the laws in the US are lower, the demands on how to maintain planes. And that's why some clever Swedish Cessna owners changed their registration from Swedish to the US, which is a security threat. So they were not so happy about this investigation. And there were some more stories from this investigation. But basically, I sent one request, got a lot of data, got a month of time, and we got 6 stories that no one else had in Sweden. So it had a big payback. The second story. Also, embassies, Swedish embassies abroad, have to give out information. This is the embassy of Sweden in, you know it? In Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. And in this small town, Karlstad, we have a big company called Embracer. Embracer is a video game company. They own also a lot of game studios in Austria, for example. And they own the complete intellectual property of Lord of the Rings. So a really, really, really important big game company. And they're based in Karlstad. And they got a $1 billion investment from the Saudi state fund. Saudi Arabia, that is not the most human rights friendly country in the world. But if you read the website from the company Embracer, they will tell you, basically, we are only good humans in this company. Human rights is the most important thing in the world. So what I did is I asked the embassy in Riyadh, what emails do you exchange with Embracer, the company in Saudi Arabia? And turns out they do. And that Embracer wanted to establish an office in Saudi Arabia, which was against all of their values that they communicated before. And it was said by their critics that they whitewash the image of Saudi Arabia by establishing themselves there. I found it very interesting that even the embassy had to give me the information, which brings us to the Swedish embassy in Austria. Because I thought if the Saudi Arabian embassy has to give me the data, then also the guys in Vienna has to give me the information. So I sent 2 requests, and I sent these requests anonymously. So you probably didn't know that I sent it to you. And you can do that. That is so interesting. You don't have to be a Swedish citizen. You don't have to live in Sweden. you basically just send an email and say, give me the information because it's my right to get it. So the first question I asked is, which Swedish citizens are imprisoned in Austria? I thought that is an interesting information. And I did get the information. I was really almost shocked. So there were, this year, 5 cases, of which 4 got help from the embassy in their prison case, basically. And then I also wanted to get details on these cases because I wanted to know, why are these Swedish citizens imprisoned in Austria? But that information I didn't get, and it was quite interesting. Maybe, Jonas, we can talk about it later, why I didn't get this information. I didn't want to know who this person was, but I thought like it would be interesting if it was drunk driving, if it was murder, if someone robbed IKEA, something like that. But I didn't get the information, and of course I could have filed a complaint to the court, but I was told by a colleague that it's not very likely that I would win, and then I would establish a presidency and Präzedenzfall, and I didn't want to do that. But then I had another important question to the embassy. I don't know if you guys know about it. I wanted to know this is by the way the ambassador of Sweden to Austria, how much contact does she have with the management of IKEA and Glock? IKEA is one of the most important Swedish companies, and Glock is one of the most important Austrian companies. Unfortunately, not a single email from the ambassador to IKEA or Glock in the last 14 days. But the embassy told me because they have to, and I found that very interesting and I wanted to show you. That's it. If you want to contact me, that's my email. And now I would like to welcome Ali to the stage to give, thank you, Jonas, exactly. I have to switch here. Jonas Wester, who is working for the embassy in Vienna of Sweden. And you're going to tell us from your end on my request how it's working. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nikolai. Thanks for that great transition. It's almost like it's a seamless transition into our application of these 2 cases, which, just for the record, I wasn't part of, so I can't comment on the structure in detail. But just a quick background. My name is Jonas Wester. I'm the Trade and Cultural Counselor at the Swedish Embassy. And I've been asked to talk a bit about our application of the Freedom of Press Act. And just mentioning as a historical background, it's one of the 4 basic laws of Sweden. So it's an essential part of our legal foundation. It's been around since, as mentioned before, 1766. And we are a bit proud of that. One of the world's first laws supporting the freedom of press and freedom of information. And I'm not here in any way to say that it's the best law supporting freedom of press or information. It's one law that's supporting. There's probably many different examples out there in the world and many good examples to learn from. But I'm just here to share a bit about our experience and take the good parts with it and maybe leave out the bad parts and make the Austrian journey the best in the world. So just a quick highlight has been already mentioned. Everyone has the right to request access to public documents, whether you're requesting it from the Swedish Embassy in Vienna or a Swedish public authority in Sweden. We are not allowed to ask about the purpose of the request. You can do it anonymously, so we won't investigate whether you're a Swedish citizen or not. So in that sense, if you have a big interest in Swedish society, there's plenty of options out there. What you have to do is to make it to the specific public authority that is keeping the document in question, and they will have to expedite your request as a priority. And good to know maybe is that there's no formal requirements or there's no pro forma demands on your request. You can literally call us up, you can send an email, and we have to then expedite that request. And this is a bit of a side note, but I think this is a very important part of the freedom of information, is how we handle official documents. I think Nikolai's two examples sort of highlight that. We have very strict registration procedures for official documents, which is supposed to let you know whether there's been an email from Glock or whether there's been an email from IKEA. A bit about the transparency, what comes in and out, and historically that used to be one of the most important preconditions to be able to exercise the right to access those documents. If one hasn't written in the registry that the documents come in or come out, then how would anyone be able to know whether it exists? But as you might realize by now, that with the higher communication frequency that today's emails do than in 1766, when maybe someone was writing a document for a day and then mailed it by the end of the day, it's a bit hard to register everything that goes in and goes out. So as Nikolai mentioned, one can also sort of look in the email registers or email logs of the ambassador, as Nikolai did. You can check whether she's been sending emails to IKEA or to Glock, and we will have to go in and look at the latest couple of days of email going in and out. So here's the 4 questions that I will have to ask myself as soon as I get a Freedom of Information request. First, what is actually requested by the supplicant in question? Secondly, are there any public documents that match that request? Thirdly, does the request document contain information that is subject to confidentiality? And fourth, can some of the information be handed out in spite of that confidentiality? And I'll just quickly go through them one by one. First of all, what is requested? As I mentioned before, there's no formal requirements, which also makes it sometimes a bit vague and imprecise what someone is requesting. So one has to try to define the scope of you're looking for all the documents pertaining to X. It's very rare that someone reaches out and says, I want document XYZ in case officer, case file 7613, because usually a journalist or an interested person in society doesn't know the exact case file document number. We'll have to look at what's requested, try to define it, and then, if necessary, we try to sometimes enter into a dialogue with the one requesting it. And I do want to highlight that this is not a precondition. Applicants are not requested or required to have a dialogue with the government, but sometimes they can actually speed things up by trying to get a better understanding of what they're looking for, instead of maybe having a very imprecise request that would take a lot of time to try to get out there, where we have to do a confidentiality check on hours and hours. Secondly, the question, are there any public documents that match the request? And as I said before, we have about 300 years of case law on what is a public document. So there's over the years, there's been a lot of work leading up to defining what is actually a public document. But the basics are that it's a document that's either been received by or expedited by the public authority in hand. And this is not in any way limited to written documents. It can be pictorial representations, it can be a video, it can be an audio recording, anything that can be played with some sort of a tool. And it's not limited to all the documents that's in these registries. All the documents, even if it's not been registered, are still considered public documents. And it could also be public documents if you approach, regardless of whether you send it by email, by phone, you send a text message, if you maybe walk up with a paper to me after this meeting and say, this is a public document to the Swedish embassy, please register it tomorrow, then I'll have to accept it in my role as a public official. I'm not encouraging you to do that, though. Thirdly, does the requested document contain information that is subject to confidentiality? And here we have confidentiality law. It's in the Swedish case called the Public Access to Information and Secrecy Act. And it lists very narrowly defined cases where we can withhold information on the grounds of national security, Sweden's relations with foreign states, international organizations, supervisory activities of public authorities, or crime prevention or prosecution, public economic interest. Those are interests of the public. And then there's a second category of interest, and that is interests of other public or private individuals. And I think that is the case when Nikolai was talking about whether he can get information about those people in prison here in Austria. And there we have protection of personal or economic circumstances of private subjects, which in this case applies to a lot of our consular correspondence with people being, for instance, imprisoned in foreign countries. So that is not secrecy in the interest of the government, but rather secrecy in the interest of the individual at hand. But as mentioned, these are very narrowly defined, and one really has to make a case why there should be secrecy in every given instance. And that takes me into the fourth question. Can we hand out any information in spite of it being covered by confidentiality according to that secrecy law? And the first instance would be, and you are very familiar with this probably, handing out redacted documents where we will try to black out the secret part and then hand out the non-secret part. But we also have the opportunity to hand out information and apply conditions or restrictions on its use. That is maybe something that we would do more in cases with discussions with researchers or scientists being interested in going into it. If it's for a journalistic purpose, then the information is, of course, to make it open to the wider public, and that maybe goes against handing information out with restrictions. So, but I just want to highlight it, that there is another alternative than just handing out redacted information. Some practicalities when we disclose information. So when you reach out to the Swedish embassy, you have the right to come and read the document at that specific public authority. We're in the 9th district, Liechtensteinstrasse, if you want to come and read it in our premises. You're allowed to transcribe, photograph, record any document that you would like to get to know more about. You're entitled to attain a transcript or a copy of the document for a fee. But this, as I said, these are old-time laws, and these days we usually handle these things via email. It hasn't fully been adapted to the modern world, the overall regulatory framework, but usually when we try to apply it, we hand out or send out copies, scanned documents, redacted or not, via email to the applicant. And then the maybe most important part is that whenever there's a non-disclosure of information, then the public authority must make a formal decision on non-disclosure. And whether it is that we consider that there are no public documents fitting the request, whether we have secret confidential material in the request, or whether we just apply one of these restrictions, redaction or any other restriction, all of those need to be subject to a formal decision that can be appealed to the Court of Appeal. As mentioned, Nikolai, that is always an opportunity, and it should be done in every given case. So that is a quick summary of how we're working with public information at the Swedish Embassy and more or less any Swedish public authority in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Yes, and we will have a Q&A after Ali's presentation, so thank you so much. And also, of course, I found out where there were no emails to ikea.com from the Swedish Embassy, because there's also a big problem in the Swedish law is if you use your private email, of course, we cannot access it. So I know that all of the employees at the Swedish Embassy, of course, make their orders to IKEA with their private email. But that's, in this case, completely fine, right? Okay, and now I'm very, very happy that, I mean, we planned this for almost a year. Ali had stories, then he got sick, but now he's in Vienna. Ali Fegan is one of the most interesting journalists, I think, in Northern Europe. He's working for Mission Investigate, Uppdrag Granskning, a TV show from Swedish public TV that is throwing over governments, making CEOs step down, public officials that are running away from their jobs, and are basically doing the most important thing in democracy, investigating shortcomings in our society. So, welcome on stage, Ali Fegan.
Can you hear me well? Yeah? Well, what a presentation. Thank you, Nick. Yes, I work for Mission Investigate. It's an old program, not as old as the Freedom of Information Act, but we've been around since 2001. It's a weekly show. We do 1-hour documentaries, about 30 each year. So we're a big crew, about 40 people, 17 reporters. And we mainly work in teams. I myself have been around for 18 years. It's a long time. I've been everything from a researcher to producer to host but reporting is my main thing, and that's where I'm back at now. So I work as a reporter. And Nick told me I've been following from distance the new law and the development here in Austria. For us in Sweden, when we're in like international collaborations or we meet international colleagues, everyone is like, but Sweden must be like the paradise for investigative journalism because you can get access to each and every document there is, which is partly true. It is much easier, and I know the situation for many of you in Austria and in other parts of the world. It's a completely different situation, but for us, it's a lot is very accessible. And I was asked by Nick if I could give some examples from my career. Embarrassingly, I will show one story that is 10 years old, and it's going to show how young and hot-headed I was back then. But it's a good example of how we use the freedom of information request. I will show some videos just for you to get a grasp, and it's. I mean, we work with TV, so it's more. It's not like only texts that these guys showed. It's the different. I mean, we've been involved in the Panama Papers. We've been involved in all big leaks, and we've done international stories. I will show mainly what we do at Mission Investigate are very local or national stories. Maybe 1 or 2 each year is like international big splashers, but some are. I will give. These are mainly like local stories, but I will show how we use them use the freedom of information request to be able to do these. And one thing that I wanted to stress out is that when we do our investigations, of course, the freedom of information requests are a big part of our investigations, but it's most of the times it's a combination of sources giving us confidential information in combination with Freedom of Information Acts. So it's very seldom that we do like a 1-hour documentary built only on freedom of information material. Does it make sense? The one to the left, the top, is about the largest dairy company, milk company in Sweden, in Scandinavia. The second one is about loneliness. The third one, the blue one, is about the social services. The third one was an international cooperation about Putin's spies in our countries, in Sweden. And the fifth one, which I would start with, was a big public tender on when the Swedish state bought helicopters from an Italian manufacturer. Yeah, I've already said all these things. it was called the Italian handshake, and they bought the Swedish Maritime Administration bought 7 helicopters, or went out on a public tender to begin with, to buy 7 search and rescue helicopters. It was a multi-billion kroner, Swedish kroner deal, tax money, but it was all very secretive, and we got tips, but no one really knew where to start. They just said there is something murky with this deal, and that's not a good starting point for a journalist. You need something more concrete. But I wanted to show you just the start of this, so you get a grip. Let me see if the sound works.
Hösten 2013. Sjöräddningshelikopter Lifeguard 001 passerar Alperna på väg till Sverige från fabriken i Milano. Svenska staten, Sjöfartsverket, har i en miljardaffär köpt 7 stycken helikoptrar från den italienska tillverkaren Augusta Westland.
There is nothing suspicious, there is nothing that went wrong. It would make no sense for me to appear on Swedish television with any comments or anything, and it's all open book. It was all open book.
Sjöfartsverket säger sig ha köpt den bästa helikoptern till det bästa priset. Så varför behöver man då bryta mot lagen, ljuga och hemlighålla hur det gick till?
Yeah, that was the start of the story. And one of the first things we did was, because when we started to do the investigation, the deal was closed. They had bought these, they had signed the contract, which you see here. And this, we requested the contract firstly to understand how much money is involved in this deal. And also some of the specifics of the deal, when are the helicopters going to be delivered, and details on the contract. But the Swedish Maritime Administration actually blacked out everything in these 1,000 pages. Everything. The only thing we could see was the name, the number of the page, and. So what we did was we went to the appeal court 3 times, because each time they found new arguments why not to hand out the contract. The first argument was, and their main argument was, they wanted, because there were secrets of the Italian manufacturer, like secrets for the company secrets in the contract. That they don't wanted, because that would destroy the situation for the Italian company. But we didn't really, I mean, that triggered us, because, I mean, it's billion kroners of Swedish tax money, and they're concerned about the Italian manufacturer, who was by then involved in a big corruption scandal in India, because they delivered a lot of helicopters to India as well. So we went to the appeal court, and what we did to begin with was to try to find if there were any precedences, if there were any earlier decisions in appeal court using the same argument, where the state agency used or the other part uses the same kind of arguments. And we found one, and we used that, and they had won, so they in appeal court, so they would. We argued that the appeal court has already made a decision in a similar case, and we would write down the name of that case, the numbers of that case, and all the details and the arguments in that case. And we won, but the Swedish Maritimes, so they had to give us, and they handed out everything but but the details on the Italian manufacturer, we weren't content with that, so we continued, and we did 3 times we had to go to appeal court. But each and every time, and this is what I wanted to tell you, is we found earlier precedences in appeal court that we used to argue to the appeal court, and that's basically, I think, how we won those cases. And in the end, we got the full contract. I understand that you don't have any precedences yet, but it's up to you to create those precedences, and that's a little bit of it can be difficult sometimes, because you don't want to make a presidency where you lose, because then you will create problems for your colleagues or anyone else who want to ask or request for the same things. So you have to be careful and do your homework and really try to argue. And normally they would just say, we don't hand out this, but then you would ask again for what paragraphs in what law, what part of the law, what paragraphs are you leaning towards or referring to, so that you can understand what to argue against. So you shouldn't take it lightly. Do your homework before you go to appeal court, and because you don't want to do bad precedencies, basically. As I said, in this case, they wanted to hide this, but what they really, this is the court decision, the appeal court decision. It doesn't make sense to you because it's in Swedish, but I wanted to show it. This is interesting because we also asked for the emails between the civil servants and the Italian manufacturer people. And there was also an Icelandic agent involved, the guy from Icecraft IS. And that's the guy who says it's all open book. So it was all open book, but obviously they made the whole deal. This email that we received from a source from inside, who contacted us actually after we had won 3 times in court. So he realized these guys are not going to give up. These are serious guys. So he contacted us, and this shows in another part of these letters. It shows that they had already secretly made a so-called Italian handshake. It says in black and white, let's make an Italian handshake on the deal. That was before the tender or the procurement time was over. So they had actually made the deal secretly on Hotmail before the tender was finished. So this we got a lot of emails, of course, but we didn't get these emails because they were made on Hotmail, so they were not registered by the people in. They can use Hotmails, right? You can use your private whatever, telephone or SMS or text message or Gmail if needed for some reason, but then you have to register it as a working email. They had not registered them for obvious reasons, so we found them through a source. But this is a clear way of how to navigate. If you want to, you can navigate around the freedom of request system. Let me see if this is, this is when I interview them afterwards. Oops, sorry. I confront them with the emails, basically.
Varför har den isländska agenten din privata hotmailadress?
Ja, vi levde faktiskt under en ganska lång period, en väldigt pressad situation där vi säkert kunde ha skett saker och ting på annorlunda sätt. Där vi kommunicerar på det sättet, ja det är möjligt, men så har det varit.
Men du är ju statlig tjänsteman. Ni gör en miljardaffär via era privata hotmailadresser.
Ja, det kunde säkert sköts på annorlunda sätt. Men nu har vi faktiskt lyckats med det egentligen vi ville ha. Vi har fått full kontroll över våra räddningshelikoptrar och fått hit det som vi verkligen har velat ha, både längtat och väntat på. Ännu bättre räddningshelikoptrar. De är faktiskt här nu.
Vi har frågat er om de här mejlen och du har ljugit och sagt att de inte existerar. Att de egentligen inte finns.
Det kunde säkert sköts på annorlunda sätt. Men nu har vi äntligen fått hit det vi ville ha. Och jag tror inte att frågan har kommit på det sättet. Vi har faktiskt varit tydliga med vad vi ville ha. Och vi har faktiskt fått hit det vi äntligen har hela tiden väntat och längtat på.
Ja, jag förstår det, att ni har velat ha Augusta Westland. Det kan inte finnas något annat skäl än att ni ville hemlighålla hur den här affären egentligen har gått till.
Nej, vi har inte hemlighållit någonting.
Men ni har ljugit om vad som finns. Varför sköter ni det på hotmailadresser då?
Ja, det är möjligt att saker och ting kan sköts på annorlunda sätt.
Det finns ytterligare ett antal avgörande mejl som Sjöfartsverket hemlighåller, trots att de skickats den officiella vägen. 7 veckor innan upphandlingen startar skriver ställföreträdande generaldirektör Noomi Eriksson till Augusta Westlands agent att man nu gärna kommer till fabriken i Italien. Citat, in order to make a handshake. Långt innan upphandlingen offentliggörs vill man alltså skaka hand med den italienska helikoptertillverkaren Augusta Westland. Vilket Lars Widell, chefsjuristen och Noomi Eriksson också gör. Ni använder privata mejladresser. Du använder din privata mejladress och de andra i Sjöfartsverkets ledning använder olika hotmailadresser.
Aha.
Det här är en miljardaffär. Ni är ett statligt verk. Varför använder ni privata mejladresser? För det är ju helt obegripligt. Förstår inte du det?
Jo, naturligtvis. Det får man inte göra. Man måste använda den officiella vägen. Alternativt att diarieföra det man faktiskt skickar på någon annan e-postadress. Nej, som jag säger, det här är tydligen inte diariefört.
Så det här finns egentligen inte heller? Det här har vi efterfrågat. Det finns inte heller?
Det kan jag inte svara på faktiskt.
Nej, men det kan jag berätta för dig. Det här förnekar ni också existerar. Varför hemlighåller ni den här korrespondensen? Det berättar inte för oss, ni berättar inte för de andra konkurrenterna. Ni berättar inte för domstolen heller att det här finns.
Nej,
ni är ett statligt verk och det är en miljardaffär.
Ja, det är helt rätt. Helt korrekt.
Så varför gör ni det?
Jag kan inte svara på varför vi inte gjorde det i det här specifika fallet och den korrespondens som finns där. Och framförallt varför vi inte har lämnat ut det när ni har ställt frågan. Jag kan tyvärr inte svara på det.
Det kan väl inte finnas något annat skäl i världen än att hemlighålla det?
Ja, jag kan som sagt inte svara på det. Jag behöver nog i så fall tänka tillbaka hur hela den här processen var. Vad är det
du behöver tänka på? Ni använder era privata mejladress med en isländsk agent.
Nej, det behöver jag inte tänka på för det är självfallet inte okej att göra det.
Nej.
Det kan jag vara helt på det klara med och gör vi det så ska vi diarieföra innehållet.
Ni mörkar ju för marknaden att ni på privata mejladresser förhandlar med en isländsk agent.
För marknaden var det redan i högsta grad känt i det läget att Sjöfartsverket ansåg att AV139 var den enda helikoptermodell som uppfyllde våra krav.
Ja, men ni berättar inte hur långt ni är beredda att gå. Att ni skriver mejl där ni ska skaka hand med dem. Att ni säkrar de första 2 positionerna. Att ni korresponderar offerter på miljardbelopp på privata mejladresser.
Det har vi inte berättat för marknaden, nej.
This made quite a splash in Swedish society back then. This was aired first. We did 3 programs on this deal. And the first one was aired in 2016, I believe. You can see how young and young I was. A lot of investigations started afterwards, police investigations and other kinds of investigations. But they got even these 2 people. They climbed even higher up in the hierarchy at the Swedish Maritime Administration. So didn't change that much, but it became pretty public how this deal was done. And these helicopters, I live in a place where I see the actual helicopter, one of the 7, is actually flying over my head all the time because they're working in this a lot in the archipelago. So, yeah. This was the first example. I think it took too long. Anyway, next one is about, this is my most recent investigation actually. It's about the social services in Sweden, and it's about a young boy who is taken by the social services in custody. They went to court because they first accused the father. It was a conflict between the mother and the mother accused the father of abusing the child. And then she accused her own 7-year-old child to abuse the younger brother. So we did a story out of this, and I will explain more. I'll just let you see the start of the film.
Tänk om det finns en 7-årig pojke som utsätter andra barn för sexuella övergrepp. Vad ska socialtjänsten göra då?
Här är bilden. Det är den sista bilden på honom. Om man bara visste att detta var det sista fotot jag skulle ta på honom.
Det här är Adam. Det påstås att han inte kan hejda sig från att begå övergrepp. Han hålls borta från skolan i långa perioder, separeras från kompisar, sina syskon, släktingar och sin pappa.
Han ska inte vara ensam med andra barn. Så är det inte aktuellt att du skulle träffa honom eller upprätthålla en relation nu.
Han isoleras och sätts i terapi, som om han var en sexförbrytare.
Har han haft några sexuella gränsöverskridande beteenden på skolan?
Men tänk om det som påstås inte är sant.
Min bedömning är att det här är väldigt vaga uppgifter.
Att han bara är en vanlig pojke som plötsligt pekas ut som ett monster. Vad skulle det göra med ett barn? Det vet Adam och hans pappa.
Okay, so this was a story that we did a 3.5-hour series on this case. It was a very difficult case, but basically we used, the main material was public material, but not material that we had collected from the beginning, but that this, the first time I was contacted by the aunt, the sister of the brother, on Messenger, on Facebook. We were not friends, but sometimes people write to me that way, and she started to explain, and this was during the pandemic, so we couldn't meet, but we had some contacts, and I was very, very reluctant because it's very difficult to, how do you prove that this has not happened? But in the end, things developed, and in the end, I had this feeling that there is something to this story. We need to really give it a try. And by that time, the aunt and the father had actually on themselves used the freedom of information requests to the social services and to the courts and to the police and all instances involved, the school. And since the father was still, vad heter vårdnadshavare? The legal guardian, thank you. He had the right to apply for these documents. So they came to us with these 2 boxes, all in all. Then there was more, all in all, I think it was about 6,000 or 7,000 pages of documents. The boy was in custody for 6 years by the social services, so this had gone on for a very long time. But they gave us this material, and we started out with this material that they gave us, but then we made the same request because you can get, as a journalist, you can get, if it regards like children or if it's sensitive material with personal integrity that you were talking about, you can always ask for a power of authority, like a letter that you write, that you're in the position and that they sign, that gives you the opportunity to go to social services, for example, and ask for these documents that regards this boy, because the legal guardian has given me this power of authority. So that is also maybe something that you will start using now. And it's basically just a short letter that says, I hereby, personal number and name and address, hereby give my authority to these people, our names and addresses and personal numbers, to be able to ask for documents regarding my son, this name and so on. So it's not a complicated letter, but it needs to be signed, and it needs to also be time framed, so it can't be forever. But since they gave us this, we started our research by searching through this material. It took us a couple of months. It was me and my colleague Katja Wagner, and it was all a mess when we got it, but we put it in chronological, we systemized it, basically. And it took some time, and we really, really tried to find flaws in the father's story. That was how we approached it. Try to find any kind of flaws or information that was contradicting the father's story. But we couldn't. And to be secure that the material was not manipulated in any way, we requested it with the help of that power of authority. And we compared the material, and it was the same material. But as always, the most sensitive material is always the most interesting. And in this case, the social services, they don't have the skills or the knowledge how to handle a young child who is committing sexual abuse to other children. So they turned to a private company called Off Clinic, and Off Clinic made some kind of an analysis on the boy. And this analysis was a report which was about 30 pages. But this was the only thing that the father didn't get from the social services. It was all redacted. Not all, but I will show here. They really tried to understand. They wanted to understand basically how this psychologist or therapist at the Off Clinic could make this assessment or come to the conclusion that this boy was so dangerous. Let me just...
Fast Lea och Daniel ber att få träffa terapeuten. De vill veta hur hon kommit fram till att Adam nu måste intensivbehandlas. Men det får de inte. Då begär Daniel att få ut Off Clinics utredning. Men när han får den är stora delar borttagna. Nästan allt som Adam själv berättat för terapeuten är maskat, alltså sekretessmarkerat.
Det är hela den där. Och hela denna. Och där. Ingenting.
Har du fått ta del av det som finns i den här, annat än det som vi ser här?
Nej, aldrig. Jag har ifrågasatt och försökt ta del av det här för att jag har velat verkligen se det. Okej, vad är det jag är anklagad för? Vad är det jag har gjort? Vad är det min son har berättat? Som jag inte vet. Som ingen annan vill säga till mig heller.
Yeah. So the father couldn't get that report. It was a crucial report for us in the end. This report was used by the social services, also redacted in the redacted form, when they went to court to take the child from the parents, or from the father in this case. So it was a crucial document in this whole story. And when we, in the end, got hold of a non-redacted version of this report, it turned out that the social services has blanked out everything that contradicts their narrative that this boy is dangerous. Later on, when we aired this, the social services started their own investigation into the case and came to the conclusion that we were right in everything, and several people were taken from their jobs, and some of the I lost the word. Several people were sacked, basically. And the boy was he could finally come home to his father. He's now living with his father. We made a follow-up story when he's later told the story on how these 6 years affected him and what this therapist at Off Clinic actually did. We could also they also concluded, the social services concluded that they had broken several laws. So now there is also police investigations on I don't know, tjänstefel, misconduct of civil servant, basically. And we could also show in the follow-up that the therapist had lied about her credentials. Her CV was false. So yeah, it made quite some. It created a lot. I mean, this situation with children taken by the social services is quite a big, I mean, quite something that people discuss in Sweden, especially since we also had, like, we call it the LVU campaign. It was a campaign claiming that they do it more than they do, which was on social media. But obviously there are cases where they take children on false basis. But the freedom, without the freedom of, I mean, without them firstly documenting everything, it would have been impossible to do this story. This case was a collaboration between the national broadcasters in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland on Russian activities, spy activities, or intelligence activities in our countries. We focused in Sweden on the embassy in Sweden and the staff there. And I'll just show. Where's the sound?
De Suecia, Dinamarca, Finlandia y Noruega. I våras avslöjade vi Putins spioner i Sverige. Och det fick konsekvenser redan innan granskningen hade publicerats.
Sweden has asked 5 employees of the Russian embassy in Stockholm to leave the country.
Sverige utvisar ryska diplomater.
Har gjort bedömningen att deras aktiviteter på vårt territorium på olika sätt har varit oförenlig med deras och är oförenlig med deras status som diplomater.
Är Putins misstänkta spioner i Sverige?
Yeah, that's we could reveal the names of 13 embassy staff from the Russian embassy in Stockholm who were either connected to the FSB, the GRU, or SVR as intelligence officers. And we did this in collaboration with something called the Dossier Center. I suppose most of you are familiar with Bellingcat and maybe Christoph Grozev. Dossier Center also has access to a lot of leaked databases from inside Russia. And we used their databases to link the people working in Sweden at the Swedish embassy to the different security or intelligence services. And we did that by, and this is where your colleagues come into the picture. We requested for passport copies to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and they say, "Hi Ali, thanks for a question. We don't give out specifics on individual civil servants. Best regards." And we really needed these passport copies because we needed the second. Is anyone very good at? Yeah, I think it's Vyacheslav. His first name is Vyacheslav, and his last name is Khmirov, as you can see. But there is also a third name, which is his paternal name, the name of his father. And that was crucial for us to narrow down so that the dossier center could actually single out that it was this person and not someone else with the name of Vyacheslav Khmirov. This was basically, and also the date of birth and those kinds of information. And this, I didn't even bother to, because there is one single state agency that is very secretive, and that is your employer. They're very tricky to work with because it's a lot about national security and the relations, Sweden's relations with other countries. But you can always turn to the next state agency. And so we try to understand, how does this work? Where can this copy be at? And when a new person comes to Sweden to start working as at the embassy in Stockholm, what they do, the Russians, they would send an application to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs would either accept or deny. And then it would, if they accept, they would send it further to the migration board, who would actually issue the visa or the diplomatic visa. So I turned to the migration board and asked for the copies of these people, and they handed them out immediately. So that's a trick. If someone says no, where can it be? In what other entity could have the same document? And ask them. Sometimes you're lucky. In this case, we managed to identify. I don't want to talk too much in depth about how we did the work with Dossier Center, because it doesn't have anything to do with Freedom of Information Acts, but we used those Russian leak databases and we had other sources, and finally we had a list of 13 people that we named that were connected to this, and some of them were named persona non grata after the show was aired. We also used, I can just say, police investigations are public. Once they go to åtal, indictment, when they go to court, they become public records. So you can ask for whole police investigations. Not everything. There might be pieces and bits that are, but you would be surprised how much is public. And in this case, one of the guys, an SVR officer, he had been involved in a court case where a Swedish consultant at Volvo had handed over technical information to SVR for money, and the security police had been secretly checking them. So he was convicted later to 3 years in prison. But we used the police investigation to exemplify how they work and what they do. We couldn't actually say anything about what these 13 people were actually doing in Sweden. We didn't have those muscles, but we could use this to exemplify. This is actually amazing. This is the surveillance camera of the. So this was in the police investigation material that we got. This is the Secret Service in Sweden. Security police secretly filming them when they're when they are doing, when they're
Men
at the
under
restaurant.
2 års tid överlämnar Christian Dmitrievski alltså hemlig information inifrån svenska storföretag till den ryska underrättelsetjänsten SVR. De undviker kontakt på telefon och e-post för att inte lämna några spår. Istället bestämmer de på förhand tid och plats med en reservtid. Och de möts ofta på ställen mitt ibland oss. Som här på restauranger på Avenyn i Göteborg, vid Stora Teatern eller vid den här kyrkan på Odenplan i Stockholm. Men den 26 februari 2019 slår Säpo till. Man har då under en längre tid spanat på de båda. Och
That's basically what we could find in the police investigation. But it's remarkable that you can get surveillance videos from the security police. I don't know if there are any other examples or similar examples, but this one we found. These were some of the names and pictures of the people that together with all of us in the Nordic project could find out. This one, not as much a spy story, but about milk. This Arla is one of the biggest milk companies or dairy companies in Sweden and also in Northern Europe, I think, in Scandinavia. They have this image of being really pro-animal rights and treating their animals in a fair way and in a nice way. And they have a commercial that has been going on for many, many years showing they're pretty funny actually, but the cows are always very, very happy. But we got a film from one of the big farms in northern Sweden, in Hälsingland, and it showed another reality from inside one of these Arla.
Det är en film också som vi skulle vilja visa dig. Jag ska ta fram den här. Så här då, det är ju då inifrån ladugården.
Skitighet över alla godkända gränser. Korna ligger i skiten.
Alltså jag som har varit länsveterinär i många år, jag måste ju säga att det här är bland det värsta jag har sett.
Filmen ska ha tagits för mindre än 2 månader sedan, i början på december. Den är totalt runt en halvtimme lång. Det här är en nerklippt version av den. Filmen visar också delar av ladugården som ser förhållandevis bra ut. Men framförallt avslöjar den att många djur tvingas vada runt och ligga i ett tjockt lager av urin och avföring. finns också extremt magra djur.
Yeah, well, you get the picture. This was really contradicting the public image of how Arla works and with their animals. And the audience, it made a huge reaction from the audience, and there were like boycotts of Arla for months afterwards. Then nothing happened in the long term. But what I wanted to say is that apart from the film, we also used, I think it's called the county board in English, Länsstyrelsen in Swedish. They actually have they are actually controlling the animal welfare at farms, and they had actually made reports on this specific farm many times, pretty bad stuff like dead animals inside, and this was public information, so Arla could get it as well. But so one of the good things about the investigation was that Arla afterwards found a system to like scrape all the county boards in Sweden on reports, because there is no automatic way where people like the county board sends information to Arla. That would make sense. But Arla found, as at least they said, they found a way to scrape and to collect all the reports from their farms. And later on, we made a story basically only on these county board reports, on the basically the same thing, but animal welfare, but with the farms that are actually eco-labeled, so that if you buy milk that is eco-labeled, it comes from this specific farm, but they were as bad as the normal ones. This made people even more angry, of course, because they pay more for doing something good, and we could show that it's not living up to the standards. My last example is a little bit It was like a very special project even for Uppdrag granskning or Mission Investigate. A man in Stockholm was found in his apartment, and he had been lying in his apartment when he was found for almost 4 years alone, and nobody has asked for him. And that sparked a big reaction in Sweden on like discussion on loneliness and how can this be possible? How the neighbors, the family, friends, no one, and so he became some kind of a symbol of loneliness in Sweden, but still anonymous. So we decided to try to use all the investigative tools that we know and possess and try to understand more about this man's life and his destiny. So it was called Stockholm's Loneliest Man, and it started like this.
En man i 80-årsåldern tros ha legat död i över 3 år i sin lägenhet på Södermalm. Han hittades igår av en polispatrull.
Ja, det var grannar som till sist hade reagerat på att man har inte sett av den här personen på länge. Och kontaktat hyresvärden då, som i sin tur kontaktade oss.
Hur kommer det sig att han har kunnat lägga där i 3 år utan att någon har saknat honom eller sådär?
Ja, det är ju en fråga som även vi ställer oss. Det känns ju inte bra att man i ett modernt samhälle kan ligga 3 år utan att någon reagerar.
Hösten 2019 hittas en man död i en lägenhet efter att ha varit avliden i 3 år och 8 månader. Han kommer att bli en symbol för ensamhet i Sverige. Men vem var han? Hej. Träffade du någon som honom?
Ja, vi pratade när vi träffades i trappan och vi lyfte på hatten.
Ja, okej.
Alltså man tittar ju in i vissa och ser att det är ganska mycket post.
Ja.
Men jag menar, det är inte det första man tänker. Att det är någon som har legat död så länge.
Nej. Vad tänker du om det?
Jättehemskt såklart. Det var så ensam.
Hej.
Hej.
Hejsan. Hej. Hej. Träffade du någon som honom?
Nej, jag har bara bott här 1 år.
Ja, jag förstår.
Jag kan tycka det i alla fall att det är inte så himla konstigt att man missar det här.
Nej.
Att han har legat där.
Nej.
Det är hyresrätter. Det är unga som bor här. Det är mycket andra hand. Så, alltså, hon som bodde här.
Ja.
Jag hälsade knappt på henne innan.
Nej.
Det flyttade in nu.
Ja, okej.
Det
är så det funkar?
Ja, nej, men precis. Folk kommer och går.
Branislav Tesanovic är 78 år gammal när han dör. Och mycket tyder på att det kan ha hänt dagen efter hans födelsedag, den 10 mars 2016. För på kalendern på väggen är lappen den 11 mars inte avriven. Radion står på när polisen öppnar dörren 3 år, 8 månader och 8 dagar senare.
Okay, so when we decided to do this, we had found his name, and through his name we found what we thought was his personal number. And when we had that, we just started to reach out to all kinds of state agencies or anyone who could possibly have any information about this man. And some of the things that we found, and this was like basic requests. Something was that he had been he had a private pilot. He was a pilot, so he was a hobby pilot. So he had this certificate for flying smaller planes. And so we, through that, we could find the flight club where he used to be. So in that way, we could find and make like a net of people that had met him during his life. The other one is when he came from back then Yugoslavia to Sweden in the 60s, and this is the document from the migration board to the right. He says he was a welder and worked with metals, woodworker, filer, driller, and also he mentions his birthplace, which is a small place called Pobuda in what is now in Republika Srpska in Bosnia. So what happens is that we also interviewed the police that investigated this case to see if there was no crimes involved. And he's one of those, I think there are 3 policemen in Stockholm who works with this on a daily basis with lonely people found in different apartments. And they have about 100 cases a year in Stockholm. And larger Stockholm, not only the city center. But they made a mistake when they tried to find out if he had any family, because they reached out to the embassy in Sarajevo, which would mean, I mean, it would make sense because it's in Republika Srpska, and they couldn't find anyone. But we reached out to some colleagues in the countries, also in Croatia and also in Serbia, and one of the Serbs actually found his sister outside of Belgrade. So in the end, we met his sister and the family, her grandson, who was translating the conversation, and she explained how they lost contact, and she, when she realized what had happened to him, she wanted us to tell his story. Otherwise, I don't believe we could have done that due to ethical reasons. And that was something I talked a lot to myself and my colleagues about with what right do we tell this man's story? But we had this discussion, and we also involved that question in the story. But in the end, she wants us to explain, and you will have to watch the film to understand what happened. But this was a very special case for me because I don't know, it was pretty emotional, and also it sparked even a bigger debate on loneliness, and there were claims that Sweden should have a minister for loneliness and things like that, like they have in the UK. It never happened, but it sparked a lot of discussions on how we treat our neighbors, our elders. We just came out of the pandemic. This was something I think most of us thought about during the pandemic, how the elders have it in our societies. So yeah, but we used mainly FOIA to understand his life. Yeah, 5 examples. Here are my contacts if you want to ask something, or if you have any questions, you just give me a call. There are many more examples, of course. Thanks.
Tack så mycket. Thank you so much. It's very impressive that a small public service TV station in the northern end of the world makes these big investigative stories and also such a beautiful storytelling.
Yeah.
Are you proud?
Yeah, I'm very proud. That's why I've been there for almost 20 years.
Great.
Yeah, but I love my work, and I think that's, and but Uppdrag Granskning, we should be proud because it's pretty unique in an international context. There are not many public service broadcasters who put such resources into investigative journalism.
I mean, in the Austrian public broadcast, we have 5 investigative programs. No, it's an insider joke. I know most of you are probably very hungry and thirsty, so I think we take 2-3 quick questions. And should we sit? We sit. Okay.
That's it.
And also, if you have a question to Jonas, I'm sure you would also answer. Okay, we sit. Is there questions for Ali or Jonas? Yes. The woman in the middle.
Thank you. My question is for Ali. I wanted to ask about the case with the dairy farm.
Yes.
And the video that you showed, was this a document you received through this Freedom of Information Act? Or who did make this video, or how did you get it?
Yeah, I should have been more specific about that. It was not something we got. It was from a source who filmed it, who was close to the farm.
But how is that connected with this thing?
No, it's that we used the county board reports to get more information on the farm and misconducts at the farm. Maybe I wasn't clear enough, but we use the county board makes like reports. They go to farms and check if the animals are okay, if everything is okay, and they make reports. And those reports are official public information.
So after this video was published?
No, before. So before the video was shot, there was already common knowledge about misconducts at this farm. And this was a point we made in the story that, I mean, Arla could have gotten those signals as well, or this information about misconducts at the farm, like we did. So that was mainly the point on the Freedom of Information Act.
I think that's an excellent example of a story that we could do in Austria just the same way. We go to the authority that is responsible for checking animal welfare and be like, give us all of the cases where you had remarkable reports on bad animal welfare in big animal companies, in farms. So that's a really good example.
You can, just a tip, you can do it on chicken farms as well.
Yeah, I would read that report. There was a colleague in the back, yes, with a question.
Firstly, a question to the speaker from the embassy, from the first speaker. Yes. How much money does the Swedish government spend on all these requests and answering them? I mean, is this 10 million, 50 million, 300 million? What size of amount is that?
I don't know, and I don't think anyone would want to know for budgetary reasons. It's a very important principle for the transparency, but I think it would be impossible to estimate. And if we would try to do an estimation, I'm guessing that would then trigger a debate in its own that would maybe lead to discussions that wouldn't be in the interest of public transparency.
And second question, Russia and 10 other countries are leading a war against European states for a minimum 20 years. Did this change the criteria of confidentiality? Because sometimes they're asking for questions which, on the first glance, look simply superficial and easy, but if you rethink it, the Russian could misuse this information. Mm-hmm. Did you reflect on that?
I think it's a very relevant, pertinent question that is something that probably should be discussed about systemic investigations into society. But I think the overall goal is to have an open and public, transparent society as much as is possible. And yes, then I'm guessing even, let's call them non-friendly actors could also benefit from such information, but the overall benefit for the society as a good has to prevail. I think that is the overall decision in the Swedish case.
And last question, in 2003, the European Commission adopted a European directive on the reuse of public sector information. I personally was involved as a researcher. If you receive a request that the multimedia companies want to have this specific type of database, whatever, on a regular basis to reuse it, like for instance, data, environmental data, energy data, whatever, okay. And you are not responsible because freedom of information is a different silo, it's a different subject. Are you forwarding this request to the PSI expert in your government? Is there any kind of collaboration? Because when we made a research in Finland and Sweden some 20 years ago, we've been a bit confused that this reuse of public data was not really known, because also the Finnish government said, oh, yes, we have a freedom of information legislation in place.
I think this question
but what do you mean with reuse?
I think this is a question you should discuss, the two of you, because it sounds very specific and difficult to follow. If that's okay, after the event, yes. But we have a last question here.
Short question, Ali. How many, if the Freedom of Information Act in Sweden didn't exist, how many of your stories couldn't you do?
I would say we use it on a regular or daily basis, like public records on people's addresses or companies, or we use it a lot. And I can't mention one story that we haven't used the Freedom of Information Act.
Is there still room for improvement?
In the freedom of, I mean, we can have a discussion later on.
Okay.
But there are some restrictions coming now that are kind of disturbing, new laws that might be problematic in the future.
All right, Ali and Jonas will be here, hopefully, after the session. So we're gonna round it up. 3 important learnings that I wrote down. One is for Austria and our colleagues, we have to be careful with making presidencies. So if we appeal in court, be sure that you make an appeal that is really, really good so that you don't lose it, because if you lose it, you make a presidency and it will be more difficult for colleagues to do the same request. A second thing I noted down is if one authority says no, go to another that also has the data and they might give it to you without any problem. And the third one that is maybe most important for nowadays in Austria, Russian spies don't make appointments via email. Very interesting. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you for everyone for the support. Dossier, the Austrian dossier, not the Russian dossier. The Forum for Informationsfreiheit. Also thank you to the Swedish Embassy for providing the food and a very interesting speaker, for Swedish television for sending you here. And thank you to all of you for coming and for your interest. And let's have some nice Swedish snacks and good conversations in this room. Thank you so much.